Now, if you grew up in the 2000s, wrestling was still pretty big back then. Obviously, in the late 90s, the Attitude Era was so popular that literally everybody was watching wrestling back then. So much that, on Monday nights, my parents, we would stop what we were doing and watch WCW Nitro or either Monday Night Raw. When something's that ingrained in you as a kid, you kind of hang on to it for a while. So I was watching wrestling still in the 2000s, and there was a wrestler named KANE. KANE is what's known as the Big Red Machine. It's a guy named Glenn Jacobs who had been in the business for a long time. He had a lot of gimmicks in wrestling before. Some of them were really bad, like Isaac Yankem, the dentist. But finally, at the 11th hour, he got the moniker of Kane, where he became the Undertaker's brother and would become one of the most iconic characters of not only the Attitude Era, but for years to come. Kane is an icon in wrestling. Here's where things started getting interesting, though. Vince McMahon was a guy that liked to dip his toes into a lot of things. There was a documentary called Beyond the Mat where he famously said, "What we really do here is we make movies."
Hopefully that simply will only be used as an entree to encourage someone's interest to then find out what we're really about. We make movies.
So Vince decided in the mid-2000s to finally and legitimately start doing that. He created what was known as WWE Films. Now, when you think of WWE Films, you probably laugh because they put out some ridiculous stuff. There are movies like The Chaperone, which starred Triple H, that I wouldn't make my worst enemies sit there and watch movies like this. They're so bad, it's not even funny. But at the very, very beginning of WWE Films, there was a glimmer of hope. I think one of the first movies WWE did was a movie called The Marine, starring John Cena. Now, this movie was supposed to star Stone Cold Steve Austin, but Stone Cold's manager thought that the script was not right, and the movie wasn't going to be any good. The movie ended up being okay, and probably was a little bit better with John Cena than Stone Cold Steve Austin, but that's neither here or there. So in 2006, WWE wanted to make a horror film with Lionsgate. They were the company at the time. What was going on in the 2000s? The movie Saw. Saw was now a franchise. We were now up into the third movie, and things were huge. So WWE got with Lionsgate and thought about what they wanted to do. They came up with the concept of See No Evil, a slasher film that would need a big menacing character. So who better than to take the character of Kane? He's a guy that you don't have to do much to. Just stick him in the movie and he's already scary. As a kid watching Kane on TV, I would always say to myself, I never hope I cross that guy in the wrong situation. Glenn Jacobs is legitimately like 6'10", 320 pounds. He's a monster. What was really funny was the way they promoted this movie at the time. Now, the character of Kane would be wrestling matches, and all of a sudden, he would start having like these schizophrenic attacks where the lights would go out in the ring and he'd be holding his hands over his head, and you'd hear this voice screaming May 19th. Looking back, it's really silly and gimmicky, but even back then when it was going on, I was like, okay, we get it. That's when the movie's coming out. You gotta remember, at the start of WWE Film, they were really trying to push these movies theatrically. So that was something that they did probably to save on advertising, because a lot of people were still watching wrestling in 2006, so let's just keep telling them during Raw that May 19th is when See No Evil comes out. I know this so well that I've never even had to look this up to verify it was May 19th. It's ingrained in my brain.
May 19th.
So, good memories nonetheless. So my dad didn't take us to go see No Evil in the theater. We waited for it to come to Blockbuster, and we rented the movie See No Evil. So let's talk about this movie, because I think WWE accidentally made a great slasher film. So See No Evil is all about this group of convicts that are going on this bus to this abandoned hotel where they're going to do community service in there and clean up the hotel to try to get time off of their sentence. Now, at this hotel, you'll see how decrepit and gross and nasty it is. When I first saw this movie, I saw it as imitation, and I don't necessarily think of it in a different way, but I can look at it through somewhat more rose-colored glasses, so to speak, and that's that this hotel is gross looking like a Saw bathroom. Saw's imprint is all over See No Evil in terms of the look and appeal of this movie, down to the group of people that are going to be knocked off one by one that you would see in the Saw sequels later on, where it's a group of them together. I think in part 2 by that point, they even had a group of people together where as they go through trap to trap, somebody was getting knocked out. So they took a lot of the same premises for See No Evil. Like I said, initially I probably saw it as imitation, but looking back, it's a time in horror that I really really enjoy. So that's kind of cool to me to see now. So you've already got some jailbirds in this movie, so you know that they're going to be mischievous in this hotel and trying to raise hell and do whatever they want to instead of actually cleaning like they're supposed to. But what we learn soon afterwards is supposedly there's hidden corridors and rooms in this hotel that nobody knows how to get to. And so this woman's explaining where they're going to be cleaning, where they're going to be staying, but there's something going on in this hotel. There's somebody there, hidden in the walls. Introducing Jacob Goodnight. He's a kid that was locked in cages when he was really little by his mom, who was deranged, overly religious, and did all these crazy things to him. Caged him for days at a time, made him wash outside. She would try to rinse his eyes out and say, "Stop looking at sin." Kind of a premise we've seen in other movies before, kind of like Carrie, but really pushed to the 10th degree. But what happens is Jacob Goodnight, our slasher villain, starts taking notice of these people in his hotel, and he is a slasher monster. So watching this movie again, I was anticipating this going to be really bad, but I was shocked at how well KANE comes across as a slasher villain in this movie. He is vicious and maniacal. It's almost like Hatchet if you were going to take the movie seriously. The character of Jacob Goodnight, when he shows up on screen, all hell's breaking loose. He is strong, but the cool thing is how believable it is. He busts through walls. He takes hooks and throws it at people and drags them up. He'll grab somebody by the neck and pull them up a laundry chute, and you believe it. And you got to remember, KANE the wrestler was every bit of 6'10", 320 pounds, and he was probably bench pressing, I don't know, 500 pounds. He was a monster. So the believability factor is what makes this slasher so cool. There's some little twists and turns in this movie that I won't spoil, but when it comes to slasher movies in the 2000s, I can't believe I'm actually saying this, but going back and watching See No Evil with KANE, this is one of the better ones. I would probably take See No Evil over the majority of Hatchet sequels, which I never thought I would say, but going back and watching this, I can't lie to myself. This was at a time where WWE Films and Lionsgate were actually putting their best foot forward to make good movies. Looking into this, See No Evil actually did pretty good at the box office too. It had around an $8 million budget and it grossed over $18 million in the box office and then made over $50 million on DVD sales in 2006. So See No Evil was a pretty big hit. The ending of this movie is what's so cool because there's a little bit of CGI work at the very end, but the look of it is almost like something from a Mortal Kombat game that actually is very charming. And when those credits start rolling, hang tight to watch a post-credit scene that will really make you laugh. But all in all, See No Evil is a thumbs-up slasher film. Emphasis on slasher film. I think you guys will really enjoy this if you haven't seen it. But the story doesn't end there. We would see WWE films continue after this, making comedies and a lot of action films. I think Mike Mizanin did a ton of Marine sequels, which I've never seen and probably will never watch. But where things get really interesting is this. In early 2015, I went to Walmart one day and just happened to look at the Blu-ray section and was surprised when I saw this. 12 years later, they dropped a See No Evil 2. But what really caught my attention were the names at the top. Danielle Harris and Catherine Isabel. Now, these girls to us are horror royalty. Obviously, Danielle Harris is famous from the Halloween films, and Catherine Isabel we know from Freddy vs. Jason. What's going on? This just came out of nowhere, and I was like, well, I gotta get it just to see Danielle Harris, right? This movie was directed by the Soska sisters, which, if you know those names, you know that those girls have a huge cult following and have made some great stuff. I put on See No Evil 2, and I'm already in love with the premise. So Danielle Harris is working at a morgue, dealing with dead bodies, of course, and she has this kind of love interest that we see in the beginning where they're flirtatious, but the guy's kind of shy, doesn't really have the guts to ask her out, but all of a sudden, as she's getting ready to leave, there's an ambulance call that comes in where these bodies are going to be brought in because of this heinous crime that took place at that hotel that we saw from the first movie. Lo and behold, Jacob Goodnight's body is being brought to the morgue. I can't believe I'm saying this, but it shocks me that after WWE Films took such this huge plummet making terrible, low-budget, crappy comedies and action films, they dropped one of the best slasher films of the 2010s with the Soska sisters. See No Evil 2 is even better than See No Evil. So KANE is back. At this point, KANE's in his mid-40s, but still he looks insanely jacked. It's not like he got any shorter. KANE is still 6'10", 320 pounds, and a monster. In this movie, there's a little bit of a mystery. The way he ends in part 1 would kill any normal human being, but not Jacob Goodnight. He comes back to life in a really bizarre scene. Now, the Saska sisters are no stranger to making some sleazy kind of scenes in movies. So in this movie, we see Catherine Isabel's character being drunk as a skunk, getting on top of Jacob Goodnight's body in the morgue, and she starts having sex with her boyfriend soon after that in the room with Jacob Goodnight laying on the table. But lo and behold, they look over after they get done and see that his body is gone. The lights go out, and we are reintroduced to Jacob Goodnight in what's one hell of a nail-biting scene. From this point, it is one of the most nail-biting slasher films you'll probably see in quite some time. Every scene where you see Jacob Goodnight come in, aka KANE, it is as intense as ever. When you think about slasher films during this time, a lot of them were tongue-in-cheek, or they were plays on the genre. Look at movies like Hatchet, look at movies like Behind the Mask, The Rise of Leslie Vernon. The See No Evil films are just taking a slasher character like Jason, being as serious as a heart attack, and just delivering on all fronts. It's so interesting going back watching these films because they're better than I remembered. I remembered thinking part 2 was good, but watching it again, not only is it so damn good, I actually think it's one of Danielle Harris's better latter films she's done. I mean, she really is running for her life in this movie, and I would like to think that half of it is in acting. When you're behind a guy like KANE, you don't have to pretend to be scared. The gore sequences of this are great, the suspense sequences in this are great, and the ending is great as well. It just shocks me to go back and watch these films and see how good they are, and I can't help but think that WWE just accidentally made slasher classics. Is Jacob Goodnight a slasher icon? My answer may surprise you. One more movie, and if it was as good as parts 1 or 2, I definitely think they would. See No Evil movies are some of the better slasher movies from the 2000s and 2010s you'll see. I would actually put these movies up higher than a lot of them. I've seen a lot of slasher movies, and I can tell you, the See No Evil films, in my opinions, are going to be classics. These movies obviously have a fan base because of the WWE fans, but for the horror fans, I'm really interested to see how many of you passed on this because you're like, I don't want to watch a wrestling horror movie. What's that about? Make no mistake, See No Evil from 2006 is a good slasher film, and See No Evil 2 from 2014 is a damn good slasher film. If you haven't seen these movies, go buy them right now and double feature these, and tell me you don't think that Jacob Goodnight is one of the most dominant slashers that could take on many other characters. Let me know if you've seen the See No Evil films, and let me know if you're familiar with the character of KANE. This is 2 great movies you could watch this Halloween season, or anytime if you're watching this video in, I don't know, February or March. In a surprise turn of events, going back and revisiting these movies, I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, I think the See No Evil films are slasher classics. Check those out, guys. I think you're really gonna dig them. Huge giant thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Without you guys, this would not be possible. To get behind the scenes photos, videos, music, private live streams, and much more, you can subscribe to my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. Thank you to my patrons.